Our journey continues now as we hit the same beaches of Normandy that were invaded by thousands of men on D-Day, 1944. In the gathering dawn of June 6th, the greatest invasion armada in the history of the world powered across the English Channel toward an uncertain fate. Awaiting them was an immense array of cannons, grenades, machine guns, and a large, well-trained army to use them behind miles of barbed wire and steel obstacles. Together, Hitler's defenses here were formidably known as the Atlantic Wall. The Allied invasion would take place along 40 miles of beach divided into code-named zones. Utah and Omaha for the Americans, Gold and Sword for the British, and the Canadians at Juneau. Visitors to the beaches today are a mix of families here for a holiday in the surf and those who come to commemorate the courage and the sacrifice of D-Day. The Allies' main advantage in that grim confrontation was the element of surprise. And in the case of the Americans who landed here on Utah Beach, there was a bit of good fortune as well. Strong currents had drifted the landing craft more than a mile south of the intended landfall. This was a stroke of luck because the planned invasion point would have been in the crossfire of two German cannons. Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt Jr., son of the late president, was in charge at Utah. Roosevelt was informed that the new landing spot was more dangerous because there was only one path through these flooded marshes. But the general decided to cross here rather than marching his men down to the beach to the original site. "We'll start the war right here," Roosevelt said. American men and tanks streamed ashore at Utah Beach, overwhelming the thin German lines. And by the end of the day, 23,000 troops had landed here, together with 1,700 vehicles and 2,000 tons of supplies. The invasion went almost as well for the British at Beach's Gold and Sword and for the Canadians at Juneau. But at the other American beach, codenamed Omaha, the story was tragically different. The solitude and tranquility of Omaha Beach as you visit it today belie the blood and chaos of D-Day. Phil Rivers of the Normandy American Cemetery explains that the topography of Omaha made it the hardest beach to storm.
You have to remember, when you look at the beach here, they had a 600-yard run-in across those tidal flats before getting to the dune line, and those flats were full of obstacles.
If this was so heavily fortified, though, why was Omaha chosen as a landing site then in the first place?
Well, because there's 5 access roads off this beach where you could egress men and equipment. Otherwise, if you look in both extremities of Omaha, it's just sheer cliffs for many, many miles. This was the only area where they could get men and equipment off the beach. And if everything had gone according to plan, they would have just walked off the beach, but that is not at all what occurred.
To make matters worse, the weather, which had already almost canceled the invasion, now seemed to take the Nazis' side of the battle. Bombers afraid of hitting Americans on the fog-shrouded coast had dropped their loads miles inland, missing the German artillery on the beach. Floating tanks had driven out onto the storm-whipped surf and promptly swamped to the bottom. That left the thousands of infantry soldiers plunging into the waves with hardly any tank support against the well-trained, well-armed Germans in these gun casemates. As you peer down toward the beach from here, you get some sense of just how steep an advantage the Nazi soldiers held.
This firing bunker here housed a 50 caliber artillery piece, medium size. Well, if you can envision looking down the distance here, landing craft pulling in, egressing troops. There were cannon fodder for this artillery piece.
Firing straight at them.
Straight down the beach.
German machine gunners waited until Americans were in easy shooting range, then simply mowed them down at will. Without tank support, the invaders could do nothing to stop them. The beach earned a new nickname, Bloody Omaha. Hundreds of bodies and shattered landing craft piled up on the beach, blocking a new assault. General Omar Bradley reluctantly considered retreat from Omaha Beach. But then the tide of battle began to turn. The U.S. and British Navy daringly pulled their destroyers so close to shore they scraped bottom to blast the German positions. Soon, little by little, American desperation and heroism began to make headway. Hundreds of small, pitched battles began to dislodge the Germans. And by the end of the day, American soldiers held a 4-mile-wide sliver of smoking, blood-stained beach less than a mile deep. The Allies had gained a position across the entire Normandy coast. Now the grind began to push the Nazis out of France.